They weren't just music legends. They were bound by something deeper. Diana Ross and Michael Jackson shared a connection that blurred the line between mentor and muse, family, and something more. From Motown's golden days to Michael's rise as the king of pop, their bond was unshakable, yet surrounded by mystery. What really happened between them? Why did Diana stay silent for so long? And what truths now come to light as she reflects on a lifetime of fame, pressure, and protection? The answers may change everything you thought you knew about them both. Not everyone knows that Michael Jackson first met Diana Ross at a Motown event when he was just 9 years old. A shy boy with wide, nervous eyes, standing among adults who expected too much. He barely spoke, clinging to his brothers, trying to look calm. Then, through the crowd, Diana Ross walked over, bent down, and softly called him sweetheart. That was the moment everything began. Diana was already the queen of Motown, confident, graceful, and untouchable. To Michael, she embodied everything he dreamed of: beauty, strength, and the freedom to shine. When she looked at him, it wasn't with pity or caution, but warmth. From that day on, he was drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain, later summing it up simply as mother, sister, and lover all combined in one. It wasn't a typical bond, not quite maternal, not just admiration, more like a place of safety in a world that kept demanding perfection. She made him feel seen. By 1971, when Diana aired, America saw them together on stage, teacher and student, mentor and star. She showed him how to move, how to smile, how to hold his nerves before the camera, and he shone. Not because of talent alone, but because someone believed in him. They never defined what they were. Between them stood boundaries of fame, race, and reputation. So they said nothing, yet always carried each other in their hearts. Even years later, traces of Diana lived in Michael's voice, his poise, his gentleness, proof that she hadn't just taught him to perform, but to exist under the spotlight. Some people meet by chance, others at the exact moment they're meant to. For Michael, meeting Diana Ross at 9 wasn't just destiny, it was the beginning of everything that would save him. In 1978, when Michael joined The Wiz, a modern remake of The Wizard of Oz with an all-black cast, most people saw it as a career move. But for him, it meant something deeper. It was the first time he could truly be with Diana Ross. Not backstage or between rehearsals, but every day, side by side. Diana played Dorothy. Michael was the Scarecrow, innocent, curious, and searching for direction, much like he was in real life at 20. No longer a child star, not yet the icon he would become, he was still figuring out who he was. The film itself failed to impress critics, but that didn't matter. What stayed with him was the quiet closeness they shared. Dinners without managers, conversations without cameras. Whispers began when Michael invited Diana to stay at his small New York apartment during filming. No entourage, no hotel, just the two of them. Neither ever spoke of it again. The crew only exchanged glances, sensing that what tied them together wasn't scandal, but something unspoken, too private, and perhaps too sacred for the world to understand. Diana, as always, stayed silent. She didn't defend herself or seek attention. And after The Wiz, something in Michael changed. He smiled less for cameras, yet there was a calm in his eyes, the peace of someone who had finally touched what he'd been longing for. It wasn't romantic love, but something purer. Acceptance. The freedom to be close, to be vulnerable, to be imperfect. They performed Ease on Down the Road and Brand New Day together, songs filled with joy and hope. But those who watched closely could sense something deeper. Between every note was an invisible thread, a harmony that came only when two people truly saw each other. The Wiz may have failed at the box office, but for Michael and Diana, it was a quiet victory. Sometimes the most beautiful things don't need to be celebrated. Maybe it was those silent nights during filming, in that small apartment known only to them, that turned their bond into something sacred. No promises, no rings, just understanding. And for Michael, that was enough. People remember Michael Jackson for his brilliance, the moonwalk, the magic, the mystery behind his perfect smile. But there was one rare moment when the mask slipped. Not on stage, not in a song, but in an interview. In 1982, during a session with Ebony magazine, Michael paused mid-conversation, his voice low and trembling, and said, "It's Diana Ross. I love her." He smiled, not for the cameras, but for himself, as if finally admitting something he'd carried since childhood. Then he added softly, "I told you wouldn't take me seriously." "Oh yeah, I'm saying that. It wasn't a joke, and it wasn't for show." For once, Michael wasn't the entertainer. He was just the boy who had once met a woman at Motown and never stopped loving her. Michael was just over 20. Diana was in her 40s, an age gap that made most people uneasy, especially in a world quick to judge. But he didn't care. He didn't need approval. He just needed to say it, for everyone to hear, that he loved her, and if he could, he'd marry her without hesitation. At a time when prejudice still lingered everywhere, a young black man declaring his love for an older world-famous diva was almost unthinkable. But Michael said it anyway, gently, decisively, as if the rest of the world didn't exist when she was near. To many, it sounded like a passing comment. But to him, it was truth, something he'd carried too long to keep silent any longer. When the interview came out, some were shocked, others dismissive. What hurt most was that few believed him, as if his love, no matter how pure, wasn't meant to be taken seriously. Still, he said it, because sometimes speaking the truth is enough to make it last forever. And for Michael, that moment, sitting quietly before the camera, admitting his love, may have been the bravest act of his life. However, it wasn't the stage lights, the roaring crowds, or the #1 hits that silenced Michael Jackson that evening. It was a wedding invitation, a simple white card sent from a villa in Europe. Sender, Diana Ross. Groom, Arne Nace Jr. In the mid-1980s, when Diana announced her marriage to the Norwegian businessman, the world celebrated. But Michael stayed silent. No reaction, no congratulations, no appearance. He quietly withdrew. This was the woman he had once confessed, "I love her," to the world. The one he believed might have been his, if life, timing, or courage had been kinder. Friends said he couldn't hide his pain. The laughter stopped. The studio fell quiet. When asked why he didn't attend, he simply said, "I loved her, and always will." No one questioned him again. To the world, he was the king of pop. But that night, he was just a man watching the woman he loved marry someone else. In that moment, he wasn't the king of pop, just a young man staring at the wedding invitation of the only woman he ever loved, knowing she would soon call someone else her husband. Unreturned love is the quietest kind of pain. It doesn't scream or fade quickly. It lingers, day after day, in every pause and every unfinished song. Michael didn't talk about it, but his eyes gave him away. Even if she belonged to the world, to fans, fame, and another family, she was still his Diana, the one he never had yet never stopped loving. After her wedding, he quietly withdrew from the spotlight. Outsiders thought he needed rest, but those close to him knew he was trying to heal. No one blamed Diana. She had every right to her own happiness. But somewhere deep down, Michael was still that boy backstage, watching her bathed in light, too shy to step closer. The pain wasn't that she married someone else. It was that he kept loving her anyway, softly, faithfully, without expecting anything in return. A love no one else could understand, one that lived on only through his music. Michael once said that music was where he hid the things he could never say. The pain, the longing, the love left unspoken. Among all his songs, two still make people whisper after all these years: Dirty Diana and Remember the Time. One burns with anger, the other drifts with nostalgia, yet both seem to circle the same name, Diana. He once claimed Dirty Diana was simply about ambitious women chasing fame. But fans noticed something uncanny. The song's copyright date matched the very day Diana Ross married Arnie Nace Jr. Even Jermaine Jackson once said it outright. Michael wrote it for Diana. Neither song was his most complex, but both carried a feeling too personal to ignore, a memory of something beautiful that could never return. In the Remember the Time video, Michael plays a man yearning for a woman too powerful, too distant to reach, a scene eerily familiar to anyone who knew how he once described Diana: mother, sister, and lover all in one. Someone both near enough to touch and forever out of reach. Michael never explained the meaning behind his songs. He left things vague, just as he did with his private life. But if you look closely at his eyes while performing Dirty Diana, you can see it. Something deeper than music. A quiet anger. Not the rage of fame, but the pain of someone watching the person they love walk away without looking back. Then came Remember the Time. Soft, wistful, almost like a whisper. Do you remember? He asks, not seeking an answer, only clinging to a memory that still mattered to him. Maybe he never meant for anyone to know. Maybe silence was his way of protecting what little was real. But people see. They listen, and those who've ever loved recognize that kind of truth, the kind that doesn't need words, only rhythm. Dirty Diana could have been about anyone. But for Michael, perhaps it was always about one person, the one he could never have, yet never let go. It wasn't the songs or the interviews that revealed Michael Jackson's truest self. It was the private, unguarded recordings never meant to be heard. In a series of leaked tapes from the early 90s, he confided in a friend named Glenda about a love he'd kept hidden for years. Then, in a quiet moment, he admitted what everyone had only guessed. It was one-sided. Our relationship was just in my head. Simple words, but they said everything. He had spent his life adored by millions, yet privately carried the ache of loving someone who didn't love him back, from the time she guided him as a boy to the height of his fame. Some doubted the story, others swore he truly loved her. But the point wasn't whether Diana knew, it was that he never stopped feeling it. You don't hold on to something that long unless it means everything. One friend later revealed a secret. Michael had a small private room at Neverland filled with her photos and keepsakes, not for display, but for comfort. A shrine to a love he couldn't let go. Unreturned love over time becomes a part of who you are. Michael didn't try to change it or erase it, he just carried it quietly, the way some people carry faith. And when he said, "It was all in my head," it wasn't self-pity. It was acceptance, the understanding that even the greatest stars can love someone who was never meant to be theirs. Because not all legends are built on triumph. Some, like Michael's, are written from the things they lost and never stopped cherishing. People often said Michael Jackson lived in another world, but his will revealed just how grounded his heart really was. Amid the legal pages and formal clauses, one name stood out: Diana Ross. It wasn't by chance or politeness. Michael had clearly written that if his mother, Katherine Jackson, could no longer care for his 3 children, Diana would take her place. Not a sister, not a friend, not a relative, but Diana, the woman he once called mother, sister, and lover all in one. This wasn't about fame or friendship. This was family. When you choose someone to raise your children after you're gone, you reveal the deepest kind of trust. Diana never commented on it, never denied it. Her silence said enough. They had always existed in their own quiet world, bound by something beyond words or definition. To outsiders, it seemed unusual. Michael, a man so private and cautious, trusting so completely. But for him, there was only one person outside of blood who made him feel safe. Some affections don't need vows or declarations. Sometimes love is expressed in the simplest act, writing someone's name where it matters most. When Michael left this world, he left behind many mysteries. But one truth was clear. In his heart, Diana Ross would always be family. Before the moonwalk, before the fame, Michael Jackson was just a boy mesmerized by one woman, Diana Ross. Every snap of her fingers, every confident stride, every tilt of her head fascinated him. She wasn't just an idol or mentor. She was the first light that shaped his artistic soul. He once admitted to imitating her, studying how she moved, how she commanded the stage, as if it were made for her. At 9 or 10, standing beside her in rehearsals, Michael didn't just learn to sing, he learned how to be seen. Diana didn't have to teach. Her presence was the lesson. Years later, her influence was still visible, in his stage poise, his sparkle, even in his style. The shimmering suits, the mysterious gaze, the quiet confidence, all echoes of Diana during Motown's golden age. Michael never hid it. He spoke of her with pride, calling her his greatest influence. But what made it special was how he transformed that inspiration into something entirely his own, blending her elegance with his boldness and vulnerability. Diana planted the seed. Michael let it bloom, not as imitation, but as a lifelong tribute to the woman who taught him how to shine. At 81, Diana Ross rarely appeared in public anymore. Quiet, private, glimpsed only through the occasional window or fleeting photo. But recently, relatives said she'd begun to speak more, not about fame or old memories, but to finally unburden her heart. One rainy afternoon, with silver in her hair and a calm, steady voice, she said softly, "Michael loved me in a way that's not easy to name." The room fell silent. Someone laughed nervously, thinking she was joking, but she shook her head. "It wasn't fleeting," she said. "It was true love." No tears, no drama, just truth from a woman who no longer needed to prove anything. She recalled how he once called her mother, sister, and lover, and how he never changed those words. For years, she kept her distance, close enough to guide him, far enough not to break him. "He gave me a kind of love I wasn't sure I could bear," she admitted quietly. "And because I knew it was serious, I dared not break it." When asked if she loved him back, she looked down at her tea and said, "I cared for him deeply, but not in the way he loved me." And that was all she needed to say. Just hearing her words was enough to understand. Some feelings never need to be explained. They live too deeply in memory to ever be spoken aloud. What likely pained Diana most wasn't that the love was unreturned, but that it existed so quietly, untouched by anyone else, yet still vivid in her heart. No one truly knows what passed between Michael Jackson and Diana Ross. There were no kisses caught on camera, no secret recordings, no photos hand in hand. Only fragments, a look, a quote, a line in a will that many dismissed as formality. But when those fragments are placed together, a clearer picture emerges. Michael once called her mother, sister, and lover, and no one laughed, because everyone knew he meant just one person. The woman who believed in him when he was a trembling 9-year-old, the first to tell him, "You can do it." For him, Diana was more than love. She was the foundation of who he became. And in 1982, when he said, "It's Diana Ross. I love her," there was no hesitation. Michael never joked about the heart. When she married, he didn't attend. No anger, no bitterness, just silence. Friends recalled the look on his face when he heard the news. Not jealousy, only loss. the kind that never fades. Years later, Dirty Diana was copyrighted the same day as her wedding. Coincidence, maybe, but in Michael's world, very little ever was, and in his will, he left no doubts. If his mother couldn't care for his children, Diana would. Not a girlfriend, not a friend, Diana, the one he trusted most. Those close to him knew he kept a quiet shrine to her at Neverland. Photos, mementos, and nothing else. No performance, no spectacle, just love kept safe from the world. They never needed to declare it. For Michael, it was enough to feel it. For Diana, silence was the only way to protect something so real. Some puzzle pieces only fit when time has passed and both hearts are gone. Yet looking back, it's impossible to deny what burned between them. A love gentle, enduring, and eternal. From a glance on stage to a name in a will, their story was told not in words, but in gestures. Maybe it wasn't a love story in the traditional sense, but it was something deeper, the kind of connection anyone who has ever truly loved will understand.